so my name's Hailey. Today I'm going to talk about my thesis experience, and I'm essentially kind of going to go through like the timeline and have like little tips built in along the way, kind of talk about like what I was considering and thinking, starting all the way from my topic up until my defense. So this is just a little about me. I'm a senior aerospace professional pilot and flight dispatch major. My minor is in honors. My hometown is Lakeland, Tennessee, which is a little bit outside of Memphis, and I'm a instrument-rated commercial single-engine and multi-engine land pilot, and I also have my flight instructor and instrument flight instructor certificates as well. So my thesis topic was, it was a creative project, and it was on the MTSU Ares Classic Ground Crew Manual. You're probably like, what in the world does that mean? What in the world is Ares Classic? I'll talk about that on the next couple of slides. So I was one of 2 ground crew members on the first ever MTSU Ares Classic team. So first ever completely department sponsored team last summer. So what is the Ares Classic? It is an all-women's transcontinental airplane race. It extends over 2,400 miles. It is 4 days long, and it's all-day visual flight rules. So what that means is that it can only be flown during the day, and it can only be flown visual, so like not through the clouds. And it consists of 7 to 9 stops, is what they call them, but they're essentially airports that you are required to stop at. So a little bit brief summary of the history of the Ares Classic. It started in 1929 whenever 20 female pilots flew. The Women's Air Derby was the name of it back then, from California to Ohio, and then it kind of transitioned into the all-women transcontinental air race in 1947, and then from there it was established into the Ares Classic, which is what it is today, in 1977. Okay, cool. So this is a picture of MTSU's first ever Ares Classic team. Me and one girl, she's over there kind of on the far end. She was on the first slide. So we were the first ever 2 ground crew. And there was 3 women that were selected for the fly crew. And then there was, I think, 2 or 3 other people as well that served on the ground crew, but they had different roles. Our roles specifically were as flight followers, which I kind of will talk about that a little bit in a minute when I talk about the manual. So this was the route for that first year. It started up in North Dakota and ended in Florida. So picking a topic. Since we were the first ever crew, we basically had to learn what we were doing and how to do it. Our priority was obviously safety, because that is a huge concern when you're flying, and we also want to do it in the most efficient way possible because you're in a race. So my experience on the ground crew demonstrated a need for an operating manual that laid out how to do this. So it essentially laid out how to do the job that we did in a standardized way. So my tips for picking a topic is pick one that you love and are interested in, and also maybe recognize and establish needs. So I noticed, hey, this is kind of something that we would need from my personal experience, so I developed that. And then also another resource is the Thesis student guide. So the Honors College puts this out, and it essentially gives you tips all the way from picking your topic through your defense. And I'll reference that a little bit. But if you have any sort of question and you're like, I don't really know what to do for this about my thesis, that guide is really, really helpful. So thesis director and meetings. Pick a director who has previous high-level writing experience, and also someone who has experience in your field on your topic. They'll kind of be your sounding board throughout the whole process, your mentor, guide you through the whole thing. And then also my tip, you're required to meet bi-weekly, but I would recommend meeting weekly to kind of help you stay on track. Even if I didn't have a lot of progress, having those meetings every single week as I was going through my thesis helped me to stay in the forward progression, if that makes sense. So your thesis proposal, these are the components of my proposal, and the 2 pictures in the back, these are from that guide that I was talking about earlier, and the guide lists out what your proposal is going to be composed of, so all the different topics, plus what those subjects, I guess is what they would be called, and what is answered and addressed in the content of those subjects. I'm going to talk about the completed project package in a second, because mine looked totally different whenever I gave it in my proposal versus whenever I gave it to my final thesis. So experiencing the Aries Classic from a different perspective. This past summer, I was selected to serve on the flight crew for our second annual team. And the new ground crew, I provided them with a draft of my manual that I made for them to use while I was flying the race. So I experienced the product of my draft manual while I was flying this race because they were using my manual through their actions of flight following while I was going across the country essentially. And then at the conclusion of the race, I provided them with a questionnaire that assessed the product and the effectivity of the manual that I gave them. And their feedback, I took that and then I created the final product of the manual that I submitted with my final thesis. Oh, that was our picture from this past summer, so that was our team. We had 3 girls as well this past summer. And this was the route we flew this past summer. So it started in Illinois, went all the way up to Michigan, and then back over to Colorado. And these are some pictures from this past summer when I flew it. This picture is actually of the Great Lakes. This picture up here is somewhere in Kansas, I'm not really sure where. This picture is over the Rockies in Colorado, so this is at the end. We actually won a leg prize this year as well, which essentially they give out awards for the overall winners plus fastest times per each leg, so between like the airport stops. And then that was also a really pretty picture of a rainbow that I got while we were flying. So your creative project. I gave a sample of my completed project package is what it was called in the proposal, but mine looked totally different in the end from whenever I gave that. I developed a draft of my manual and then provided to that ground crew like I said earlier, and then I finalized my creative project, I guess the final draft of that manual from their feedback. And it gave an opportunity for trial and error of my manual and proof that the product of the manual that I developed was indeed successful in the job that I was using, or that I was aiming for it to be used for. And then I attached that final product to my final thesis. So that is what it looked like in my proposal over there, that picture. And this is what it looked like in the end. So you can kind of see the difference. It kind of kept the same sort of checklist set up, but it was totally different and way more advanced than from what I had proposed. So basically where I'm getting at with that is like, whenever you get to that point about the completed project package, I was like, oh my gosh, I have no idea what I want it to look like. It's totally fine. You're gonna work towards it as you get there, so don't stress about it in the proposal. So resources, that honors thesis guidelines that I was posting, or that I talked about earlier, that's a big help throughout the whole process. Also, using your writing format manual. I did mine in APA 7, and there were so many times when I go to my director, Dr. Knapp, and be like, I have no idea how to format this in APA 7. That manual will tell you how to write something if you don't know how to do it. So whether it's MLA, APA, whatever your writing style is, have the manual for it because that is your direct primary source for how to format things. So your final thesis, it combines your proposal plus your creative project. My main body of my thesis was recapping my experience this past summer flying the race, so my personal experience as a flight crew, and I reinforced that product of the manual. So I referenced the manual where the ground crew used it throughout my leg-by-leg recap in my final thesis. So I would say, this is what we did, this is how the ground crew helped us, and they used this part of the manual. So basically just reference how it was being used throughout my time of actually flying. And for your defense, explain your whole process, know it in and out, and also know your product and your process of developing your product. So just overall sum everything up. For your topic, pick something that you enjoy, maybe find a problem that needs a solution, recognize an established need. For your director, pick someone in your field with writing knowledge, meet weekly if you're so inclined. proposal, do your research. This will make your thesis way easier to kind of get that out of the way. That is going to be directly put into your final thesis, so put the work in ahead of time. Use your resources, they're extremely helpful. For your final thesis, you're going to recap your project development process and the application of it. And then for your defense, just know your product and your process and bring any aids that you would like. Any questions? Yes.
So your second year, you got to be, you were the pilot, yes? Mm-hmm. And you got to see how the ground crew use your manual. What kind of feedback or information were you able to, I guess, understand as the pilot, which helped you further, I don't know, edit the manual?
So, as the pilot, I recognize really the main thing from the other position, being on the other perspective, was staying in contact with the ground crew people. So we weren't able to experience their help if we didn't have a way to stay in contact with them. So like keeping our phone charged, keeping communications open, that was really the biggest takeaway I had from flying versus being on the ground crew was, they're extremely helpful. They're doing all of our flight following. They follow us the whole time. They work with us on strategizing. They work with us on looking at hazards, analyzing our route. So they really do a lot of work. So keeping that communication line open with them and kind of just talking with them, working together as a whole, as a team, was really the biggest takeaway from flying it versus working on the ground crew. Yes?
Is your race like a timed race? Do you all depart exactly at the same time from the first airport and get to the first stop, whoever makes it first, or is it just that you can depart anytime you want to and they're simply timing the intervals?
Yeah, so the way that the whole thing works is essentially like time trials, if that makes sense. So the airplanes, they're all going to be like single engine land airplanes that are racing, but every plane's going to have their own different speeds. Some are faster, some are slower. But before the race, they have a specific way of collecting data for your specific plane. So they assign your plane a speed, and they're like, it should take you this long to fly this amount of time, and then you actually do it, and they compare how long it actually took you to how long it was supposed to take you, and whoever does the best in comparison for that is how they give out awards.
So it's like having a handicap speed?
Yes, they give us a handicap speed is what they call it, yeah.
So the other thing you said was that in terms of these stops, I believe the number you used, it was 7 to 9. Mm-hmm. Is the number of stops optional for you to pick, or does every team have to stop at all stops?
So every team has to stop at every stop. We all depart at the same time on the same specific day from that one airport, and because some planes are like faster than others, you get kind of spread out throughout the next couple of legs because it's over like 4 days. But you have to stop at all those specific airports. And the really crucial part about that is where that comes into play is how your timing works is you take off, and then you'll come back around and do like essentially a low pass over the airport, and they start your timer, and your timer does not stop until you overfly the next airport that you're required to. So that's where like strategizing comes into play. It's like, well, if I have to divert and land at an airport I'm not supposed to, my time is still ticking. It's still being added to my score. So you have to go to those 2 airports. If you divert for safety, obviously safety is still the highest priority, but it will like add to your time because that's kind of how they do their timing. And if you don't get to like that end stop, so like the end stop, then you don't finish the race essentially, and that does happen pretty often, and it does happen every single year.
Did you all finish?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Both years?
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Anything else? Yes.
It's a question about flight planning ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
For this race, for each leg you have to be, of course, wise about how much fuel you burn.
Right.
How low did it get on yours?
I don't know specifically how low, but we never got below like legal requirements for like legal reserve. So obviously we're not like breaking regulations whenever we do this. Obviously like safety is the first thing. But fuel planning is a big consideration whenever it comes to this race because more fuel equals more weight equals you're not as fast. So that's kind of where the ground crew goes into play. and I included that in my manual as well, is that fuel calculations is a specific piece as to, you want to figure out basically like a margin, because you're flying not in regular cruise, you're flying like full power, so it's like different fuel consumption than regular. So that's kind of a bit of the strategizing that ground crew does with the flight crew beforehand. I don't know the exact as to what we got down, but we would always add in like a margin for safety, but we didn't take like full fuel every time. We would add in like the margin for safety plus the required reserves by like the FAA. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Did I answer your question? Cool.
Where did MTSU place?
We only raced against collegiate teams. I think we placed like 14th out of 20 something. I don't know the exact 20 something, so about like halfway, which is pretty decent for our second year ever doing it, because there's teams that have been doing it for like, I don't know, like 20 years, something like that.
Excellent.
Anything else?
Thank you, Hailey.